My daughter laughed when she saw me at the auction. She was standing near the front in a sharp beige blazer, her hand resting on the arm of her husband. Her laugh wasn't loud, but I heard it clearly, like a spoon against an empty glass. "Say goodbye to your house," she said, too quietly for the others to hear. "Someone else will mow your lawn from now on." I didn't respond. I looked around the room. The rows of folding chairs, the slicked back hair of the auctioneer, the murmur of low conversation, the smell of carpet cleaner and bad coffee. The man 2 seats over had a glossy booklet open on his lap with a picture of my front porch on the cover. My porch. The one where I once held my granddaughter as she giggled at wind chimes. Lot number 7, it said. 3-bedroom family home. Needs modernization. The bidding hadn't started yet. They didn't expect me to come, and certainly not to bid. I was supposed to stay home, quietly, like a story nobody reads anymore. But I wasn't a story. I was still here, and I was about to remind them. How I got there. That's a longer story. 2 weeks earlier, I was folding laundry in the kitchen when I noticed an envelope tucked into the stack of local ads. No return address. I almost threw it out. But something about the crispness of it made me pause. Inside, an announcement for a public estate auction. A small line of fine print caught my eye. Lot number 7, 14 Windmere Lane. My address. I sat down slowly, the paper trembling between my fingers. It had to be a mistake. But I read it again and again. My house, my name, and below it, in typewritten letters, sale authorized under power of attorney. I remember when she asked me to sign that. Just for convenience, Jeanette had said, all warm smiles and concern. In case anything happens and I need to make decisions quickly, medical stuff, bills. It was 2 winters ago when I was recovering from a fall. I had nodded, trusting her. She was my daughter. I never imagined she'd use it like this. I called her immediately, voice tight. "Jeanette, I got something strange in the mail today." She paused. "Oh?" "An auction listing, with my address." A beat of silence. "Oh, that," she said at last. "I meant to talk to you. It's time, Mom. That house, it's too much. You can't keep up with it." "It's my house," I said. "I know, but it's not safe for you. And frankly, it's an asset that could be doing something useful." I could barely breathe. "Useful to whom?" She sighed. "Don't make this harder than it is. You'll have a lovely place at Meadow Hills. Everything taken care of. Meals, laundry, your own little garden." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "You already signed the power of attorney," she reminded me. And then, with finality, "It's done." I didn't sleep that night. I walked through every room like I was already a ghost. Touched the edge of the piano my husband once played. Smoothed the lace on the old lamp I brought back from Ohio in '72. My life wasn't a liability. My memories weren't a burden. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. One to a lawyer, one to the bank. I had enough tucked away. Not millions, but enough. Enough to make a point. And now here I was, sitting in the 5th row in my best coat, with my handbag beside me. Watching my daughter smile smugly as the auctioneer stepped to the microphone. He started with the smaller properties. I waited. Lot number 1, lot number 3. A few sales, some polite applause. Then, lot number 7, a charming 3-bedroom home on Windmere Lane. I saw her perk up. She leaned toward the front, expecting someone to raise a paddle. Anyone but me. The auctioneer opened the bidding, and I raised my hand. Paddle steady. The sound in the room shifted, a whisper of confusion. My daughter turned sharply, eyes wide. "Mother?" she said, stepping toward me. But I was no longer the quiet woman who signed forms without reading them, no longer the easy mark. I said nothing. The bidding continued, and I kept my paddle raised. The house wasn't grand. It didn't have marble countertops or a fancy zip code, but it was mine. We bought it in 1972, when we still thought the world was a kind place and forever meant something. I was 25, David was 28, and we had just enough in our savings account to make a down payment with trembling hands and hopeful hearts. The neighborhood was nothing special back then, a cluster of modest homes with screen doors that slammed in summer and sidewalks that cracked in winter. But it had a big maple tree in the front yard and a porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs, and that was enough for us. David installed the mailbox himself. It leaned a little to the left for the first 10 years until I finally convinced him to straighten it. "It's charming," he used to say, tapping it fondly. "Like us." We raised Jeanette in that house. She was born on a cold April morning, and I still remember the sunlight cutting through the nursery curtains. I sat in that room with her on my chest and thought, this is everything. Her first steps were in the hallway by the pantry. Her first tantrum was on the kitchen floor over a broken crayon. Her first heartbreak happened on our front porch, the boy pacing in the yard while she sobbed into my sweater. We built a life in that house. Not a perfect one, but a good one. We patched the roof ourselves when it leaked in '84. Painted the living room yellow after David lost his job to remind us that not everything was falling apart. Planted peonies by the fence line the spring after my mother died because I needed something beautiful to look at through the kitchen window. The years rolled forward. Jeanette went to college. David passed. I stayed. I stayed because leaving felt like abandoning something sacred. Not the bricks and boards, but the invisible weight of memory. The way the stairs creaked in just the right place. The dent in the hallway wall from the time David tried to carry in a new bookshelf. The carved initials on the porch rail that Jeanette thought I didn't know about. There were offers, of course. Over the years, realtors left cards in the mailbox. Great potential. Prime location. One even had the nerve to call during dinner. But I always said no. I didn't want a new house. I didn't want modern features or open concept living. I wanted the house where I nursed my husband through his final winter. The house where I taught Sunday school lessons at the dining table. The house where I knew every sound and shadow. Jeanette never understood that. She used to visit more often, in her 20s. She'd bring wine, sit on the couch, kick off her heels and talk about work. But then the visits grew shorter. Then they stopped. Phone calls became terse check-ins. Birthdays forgotten, then remembered with belated texts. She said I was stubborn, that I refused to adapt. But I wasn't the one who changed. The last time she stayed the night, 3 years ago, I overheard her on the phone. "It's just old. Smells like dust and regret," she whispered. I sat in the next room, knitting, pretending not to hear. But I did. Still, I didn't expect this, to see my life printed in glossy ink on auction brochures, to hear my home described as an investment opportunity, to watch men in polished shoes glance around the rooms I once scrubbed on hands and knees and say, "The bones are good, but it'll need a full renovation." No one saw the bones of that house like I did. I knew where the wood was soft and where it held firm. I knew which floorboard whined when you stepped on it and how to angle the back window so the breeze caught just right in July. I knew which part of the kitchen counter David always leaned on, leaving a worn patch in the laminate. None of that mattered to them, but it mattered to me. The day I learned about the auction, I sat in the living room for hours, just breathing, listening. The silence of the house was different that day, tight, watching me, as if it too had heard the news and was waiting for my answer. I stood up, walked to the corner where David's chair used to be, rested my hand on the empty space. "Don't worry," I whispered. "I'm not letting them take you." I'm not sure if I meant David, or the house, or something else altogether. That evening, I pulled out the folder marked Important, the one I hadn't touched since the year after David died. It had everything: deeds, insurance, a safety deposit box key, and the small ledger notebook I'd kept for decades. Every time I dipped into savings, every time I lent Jeanette money, I wrote it down. I turned to the last page. There was still enough. Maybe not to outbid a developer, but enough to make noise, to make them look at me, to say, "I was here. I built this. You don't get to erase me with a gavel, not without a fight." Jeanette wasn't always like this. There were years, distant, blurry years, when she clung to my skirt at preschool drop-off and cried if I so much as glanced toward the door. When she'd curl up beside me on the couch, her small hand clutching mine, whispering secrets about butterflies and monsters under the bed. She used to call me Mama, in a voice so soft it could undo me for days. That little girl is gone, replaced by a woman with sharp lipstick and sharper eyes. I still remember the exact moment I realized she had left and someone else had taken her place. It wasn't one of those loud arguments or dramatic scenes. No, it was quiet. That's what made it hurt so much. It was 5 years ago, on a Tuesday. She came over to help with the bills, or so she said. I'd asked her to look over some medical insurance papers. David always handled those things, and after he passed, the numbers started swimming on the page. Jeanette sat at the table with her sleek laptop open, typing and clicking with brisk efficiency, barely looking up. "Mom," she said suddenly, without ceremony, "you should really think about selling." I paused. "Selling what?" "The house." I thought I misheard her. She sighed. "It's too much for you. You're living alone in 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a yard the size of a small park. It's inefficient. And honestly, it's not safe." Safe. The word lingered like a mosquito. She always hid behind safety, convenience, efficiency, what was best. I told her I wasn't interested, that the house was fine, that I had a system, a rhythm, but I saw it then. The look, that pinched expression that said, "Here we go again." My stubborn, outdated, impossible mother. She didn't argue. She just closed her laptop and said, "We'll revisit this later." And she did. Every holiday, every phone call, every awkward lunch in that overpriced cafe she loved. She'd circle back to it. "When are you going to downsize? Wouldn't you prefer something modern? Have you looked at Meadow Hills? They have heated floors and a book club." At first I thought she was just concerned. But over time, her concern began to sound a lot like impatience. And then there were the favors. They started small. A few hundred for a car repair. Then it was help with the down payment on their new house. Then the tutoring fees for Lily, her daughter. Always with a promise to pay it back, though nothing ever returned. Still, I gave. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We give, and give, and give. Until we're dry bones, smiling politely in the corner, hoping someone remembers we used to matter. When she brought the power of attorney papers, It was disguised as care. "In case of emergency," she said. "It's just a backup. You don't even need to think about it." I should have asked more questions. I should have had someone read it. But I signed. I trusted her. That trust ended the day I found my house in an auction catalog. I didn't yell when I called her. I didn't cry. But something in my voice must have shifted, because she responded like I was being unreasonable, like I was standing in the way of progress. "Mom, you're being emotional. This is what's best for everyone." Everyone. She said it so easily, as if I wasn't part of that word. She didn't think I'd fight. She thought I'd fold, just like always. Nod and smile and retreat into my crocheting while they dismantled my life one brick at a time. But something in me, something old and quiet and fierce, woke up. You don't get to erase me. That night, I sat in the kitchen, the same chair David always used, and made a list. Not of grievances, though I could have filled pages, but of things I remembered. The things Jeanette had forgotten, or chosen to forget. How she sobbed when her first boyfriend broke her heart and I made her grilled cheese at midnight. How I stayed up all night sewing her Halloween costume the year she wanted to be a comet. How I drove 6 hours through a snowstorm when Lily was born because Jeanette was too scared to be alone. I wasn't just a name on a deed. I was the hands that held her, the voice that calmed her, the roof that sheltered her. But now, I was an asset. A week before the auction, I called Lily. My granddaughter, she's 23 now, lives 2 states away, but she still sends postcards, little doodles in the margins. Still calls me Nana, like she's 5. She picked up on the first ring. "Nana?" I smiled. "Hi, sweetheart. You okay? You sound funny." I hesitated. "I just wanted to hear your voice." We talked for 15 minutes, about her job, her cat, a book she thought I'd like. She didn't know about the auction. I didn't tell her. Some betrayals are too heavy to pass down. After we hung up, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to raise my paddle. Not to win. Not necessarily. But to remind them I was still here. And I wasn't leaving quietly. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the way Jeanette tried to convince herself she hadn't done anything wrong. The morning after our phone call, the one where she told me, calm as you please, that selling my house was already in motion, I found an envelope in the mailbox, a thick one. No return address, but I recognized her handwriting on the front. For review. Inside were 3 glossy brochures. Meadow Hills, Retirement Redefined. Riverview Terrace, Peaceful Living for Independent Adults. Pine Grove Village, where comfort meets care. I flipped through them in silence. Cheerful stock photos of gray-haired people playing board games and drinking tea on sun-drenched patios. Everything clean, white, overly bright. Everyone smiling like they'd never lost a single thing in their lives. One page had a mock floor plan, a studio apartment, barely bigger than my laundry room. It showed a little couch, a kitchenette, a twin bed in the corner. No dining room, no porch, no space for the grandfather clock David's father built, no wall long enough to hang the family quilt. On the last page of one brochure, someone had circled a line in blue pen. Private garden boxes available upon request. A box, not a yard, not a tree to lean on, just a box. I placed the brochures on the counter, one beside the other, and stared at them like they were foreign language textbooks. And then I folded them, neatly, and dropped them into the trash. At lunch, Jeanette called again. "I just want to make sure you had time to look at those options," she said, like she was reminding me to try the salmon special at a restaurant. "I did," I said. "And? They're not for me." She sighed. That heavy, theatrical sigh that people use when they want to seem patient, but are in fact boiling with irritation. "Mom, we've been over this." "No," I corrected her. "You've decided. We haven't discussed anything." There was a pause. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But instead, I reached for my tea and said, "No, dear, you are." She hung up not long after, said she had a meeting, promised we'd talk soon, but I knew we wouldn't. That night I couldn't sleep. My head throbbed with a dull pressure, like my brain was pressing against the inside of my skull, trying to escape. I paced, touched the back of the armchair, ran my fingers over the keys of the piano, dusty and unused. Sat at the kitchen table until the sunrise slipped between the curtains and lit up the dust in the air like gold flakes. I called the lawyer at 8:01 a.m. His name was Philip Gordon. He was younger than I expected, early 40s, with kind eyes and a wedding ring. He twisted when he was nervous. I'd chosen him because he came highly recommended by Mary Kloss, a friend from church who recently set up her own trust fund. Philip listened carefully as I told him everything about the power of attorney, the auction, the brochures, my daughter. He didn't interrupt, just nodded, took notes, occasionally raised an eyebrow. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Mrs. Morgan, I'm going to be blunt. This isn't uncommon, but it is unethical. Depending on how the power of attorney was worded and when it was invoked, we may have options." "Can I stop the sale?" I asked. "Possibly, but we'd have to act fast. Once it goes through the public auction system, it'll be harder to reverse." "What if I just buy it myself?" He looked surprised, then smiled. "You could. That would certainly make a statement." I nodded. "I want to make one." He walked me through the legal logistics, what I'd need to do at the bank, how to authorize a hold on any financial transactions tied to the power of attorney, how to formally revoke it. We drew up the paperwork together. He didn't question my choice. He didn't condescend. He treated me like a client, a person. That was more respect than I'd had from my own daughter in years. Afterward, I went straight to the bank. My branch manager, Michelle, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who wore crisp blazers and remembered everyone's birthday. She greeted me by name, sat me in her glass-walled office, and listened without blinking as I explained. "Do you want me to freeze the account access under her name?" she asked. "Yes." "And redirect all notifications to you?" "Yes." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. "It's done." That was it. No fireworks, no thunderclaps. Just a quiet moment in a quiet office where a woman finally said, "No more." I walked out of the bank and into the bright afternoon sun, feeling taller somehow. Not stronger, not yet, but steadier. Like my spine remembered how to stand on its own again. That night, I took out a small notebook I hadn't opened in years. It was blue, leather-bound, a birthday gift from David on my 60th. I used to write memories in it. Little things. The first time Lily said Grandma. What Jeanette looked like on her wedding day. The way David's hand always found mine under the dinner table. I flipped to a blank page. September 10th. Today, I stopped being afraid. Today, I said no. And tomorrow, I'll go to the auction. It was Lily who told me the exact time and place. Not on purpose. She called the night before the auction, cheerful as ever, talking about her new apartment and the weird neighbor who plays jazz at 2 a.m. And oh, Mom says she's taking tomorrow off for something important. Big family errand. Some kind of signing, I think? She was vague. What kind of signing? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Don't know, Lily said lightly. She and Rob were arguing about parking permits or something. You know them. Anyway, I think she's dragging him downtown. I offered to watch Milo, but they said they'd be gone just a couple hours. She mentioned a courthouse, or maybe the city building. That was enough. She didn't know. Jeanette hadn't told her what she was doing. I almost felt grateful for that. After we hung up, I sat at the dining room table for a long time. The house was quiet. My cup of tea had gone cold. Outside, the street lamp flickered like it always did after midnight. I imagined her, signing papers in a crisp blazer, hair perfect, pen gliding over the lines that would hand my home to a stranger. I pictured her laughing at some joke Rob made, maybe saying something like, "Well, it's just a building, she'll adjust." But I wouldn't. I knew that now. I thought about not going, letting it happen, letting her carry the weight of what she'd done, letting silence be my final reply. But that wasn't me. Not anymore. At 7 the next morning, I dressed carefully. Navy blue dress, the one with the simple pleats and the small pearl buttons, the same dress I wore to David's retirement dinner, the same one I wore when Jeanette won her first science fair, the same one I almost threw away, but didn't. I pinned my hair up, added a touch of lipstick. Not for them, for me. And I packed a folder. Bank documents, identification, a letter from the lawyer, just in case. I wasn't going there to make a scene. I was going to be present. To stand in my truth. The auction hall was in the old municipal building on Ashbury Street. I hadn't been there in years, not since Lily's high school graduation, when they held the ceremony in the same room. It looked smaller now, folding chairs in rows, a podium at the front. A projector screen glowing faintly with the words, Riverville Estate Sale, 11 a.m. I walked in, heart steady, and then I saw her, Jeanette, sitting in the second row, her tablet in one hand, phone in the other. Rob beside her, flipping through a catalog. They were whispering, smiling, confident, comfortable. She didn't notice me at first. I found a seat in the 5th row, set my folder on my lap, crossed my ankles, waited. More people trickled in, a few in suits, a couple that looked like flippers, cheap shoes, quiet chatter, an older man with a notepad and a real estate badge clipped to his shirt. Then the auctioneer stepped up. "Good morning, folks. We'll begin shortly. Please make sure you've registered and picked up your paddles." I held mine in both hands. The room settled. And then Jeanette turned, saw me. Our eyes met. She blinked once, like she wasn't sure I was real. Then her face changed. Not panic, not yet, but discomfort. A tightening around the mouth. A flicker of something behind the eyes. She nudged Rob, murmured something. He turned too, looked at me, and frowned. I didn't move. I just sat there, upright, composed, ready. Let her wonder, let her sweat, let her feel, finally, what it was like to be seen. There's a particular kind of silence that happens just before a public auction begins. It's not the silence of reverence or nerves. It's the silence of calculation. People glance at each other sideways, mentally measuring wallets, confidence, territory. I'd never been in a room like that before. But I recognized the energy. It was the same one I used to feel in the PTA meetings when Jeanette was in middle school. the mothers all subtly posturing, pretending they weren't competing, while doing exactly that. The auctioneer, a man in his 60s with a tan too orange to be natural, cleared his throat into the microphone. Let's get started. Lot number 1. My house was lot number 7. I listened carefully, not to the items, but to the people. One man always opened the bidding. A woman in the 3rd row always raised after him. The flippers at the back barely moved, but jotted things down furiously. Jeanette didn't raise her paddle once. For the first 6 lots, she just watched. She wasn't here for anything else. Only the house. She was waiting. When they reached lot number 7, I felt a shift. A breath held. The auctioneer glanced at his notes. Next up, lot 7. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath home on Windmere Lane. Great Bones, prime neighborhood. Property has been cleared for expedited transfer. Shall we start the bidding at $120,000? Jeanette's hand moved instantly. Paddle up. Her number, 103. 125, the auctioneer nodded. Do I hear 130? Another paddle shot up, someone behind me. Jeanette's head turned sharply. She wasn't expecting competition. Thank you, the auctioneer said. 130. Do I hear 135? There was a pause, and I raised my paddle. Not fast, not timid, just steady, deliberate. The room didn't gasp. Life isn't a soap opera. But there was a definite ripple. Heads turned. Jeanette did a full double take. I looked her straight in the eye. She blinked, then narrowed her eyes like she thought she must be misunderstanding. The auctioneer glanced down. Paddle 117, 135. Do I hear 140? Jeanette raised her paddle again, her lips tight. 140. I raised mine again. 145. Now there were murmurs. Someone leaned toward their neighbor and whispered something. I didn't care. I wasn't bidding to win. I was bidding because it was mine. Because they needed to know I hadn't given up my voice just because I'd gotten quiet over the years. Jeanette turned to Rob, whispered sharply. He shook his head. She looked forward again. 150, she said under her breath, raising her paddle. 150 to number 103. Do I hear 155? I didn't move, not yet. Let her sweat. The auctioneer looked around. 150 going once. I raised my paddle slowly. 155. Jeanette's face flushed. I could see the color rising up her neck. She raised again. 160. The auctioneer seemed amused now. We have a real contest here, folks. I raised again. 165. My voice was calm. My hands weren't shaking. This wasn't about money. Not for me. Jeanette stood up, the only person in the room on her feet. Excuse me, she said loudly. I'd like a word with the auctioneer, please. He looked startled. Ma'am, we're in the middle of bidding. I understand, she said, tight-lipped, but I believe there's a misunderstanding. That woman, she gestured at me, is my mother. She doesn't have the right. Actually, I do. My voice didn't boom, but it cut through the room like thread through silk. Everyone turned. I stood slowly. From my bag, I pulled a folder. Legal revocation of power of attorney, signed and notarized, effective as of 3 days ago, filed with the county clerk and attached to the title. Jeanette froze. The auctioneer stepped down from the platform, took the folder. Looked through the papers. He glanced up at me, then at Jeanette. This changes things, he said quietly. Jeanette's mouth opened, closed. Her face was a storm of disbelief, confusion, fury. Mom, she said, almost a hiss. What are you doing? Something I should have done a long time ago, I said. There was no applause, no dramatic music, just a long, loaded silence. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Given this new information, we'll need to pause the sale of lot number 7. Please take a brief recess while we confirm legal documents. People stood up, talked in hushed voices. Some stared at me, some stared at her. Jeanette turned back to Rob. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I sat back down, calm, certain. I wasn't here to perform. I was here to take back my life. She followed me out into the hallway like I knew she would. The auctioneer had called a 15-minute recess, giving everyone time to stretch their legs and, in his words, gather clarity. The air outside the bidding room smelled faintly of lemon polish and dust. One of those old government buildings that had been scrubbed 1,000 times and never quite lost the scent of old paper and aging linoleum. "Mom," Jeanette said sharply, heels clicking behind me. "What the hell are you doing?" I turned slowly. She stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, chin lifted like she always did when she wanted to seem taller than she was. "I'm stopping you," I said plainly. "From what?" "From stealing my house." She scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No," I replied. "You are. You just didn't think I'd notice." Her mouth opened, but I raised a hand. "Don't," I said. "Not now. I gave you years to speak, years to say something honest. Now you listen." She hesitated, clearly torn between storming off and doubling down. She chose the second. "You don't know what you're doing," she said. "You're letting your emotions get in the way of what's smart." "No," I said again, quietly. "I'm finally letting my emotions speak, after a lifetime of making everything convenient for you." She rolled her eyes. "It's not about convenience." "Isn't it?" I asked. "Then what was that brochure you mailed? Meadow Hills? Pine Grove? Boxes painted like homes?" Her cheeks colored. "You need care." "I need honesty," I said. "And respect." Jeanette looked around, as if checking to see who might be watching. Then she stepped closer. "This is embarrassing," she hissed. "You showing up here like this, making a scene." "I haven't raised my voice once," I said calmly. "You're embarrassed because for the first time in years, you can't control the story." She flinched. "I never meant to hurt you," she muttered. "But you did." Her eyes met mine then, and for the first time in a long time, she looked like the girl I once held at the end of the hallway after her first nightmare. Confused, defensive, scared of being wrong. "I thought," she began, "I thought you didn't care, that you'd be relieved, that the house was too much. You never asked." Her silence said everything. "You decided," I went on. "You and Rob. You looked at the balance sheets, at the square footage, at the size of the yard. You saw numbers, work, inconvenience. You didn't see me." "That's not fair," she said. "No," I agreed. "It's not." She sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "you let me finish what you tried to start. You watch as I buy back the house you tried to sell from under me. You're actually going through with this?" "Yes." "You don't even need that house anymore." "It's not about need. It's about choice, about dignity." She stared at me, jaw tight. "You'd really rather spend your savings just to make a point?" "No," I said softly. "I'd rather not have to. I'd rather my daughter saw me as a person, not a transaction. But here we are." There was a pause, long and aching. "You're being spiteful," she finally said. "And you're being small," I replied. She blinked. "If I'm spiteful," I added, "I learned it from the silence I've been swallowing for decades. her eyes filled with something, anger, maybe, or fear, or shame. I didn't push. We stood there, two women bound by blood and disappointment, the hallway between us filled with years we couldn't rewrite. "I have to get back inside," I said at last. "I'll contest it," she said, half a threat, half a question. "You can try," I said, my voice calm, "but you won't win." I walked past her then, the smell of her perfume lingering, familiar and distant all at once. For a moment, I thought she might reach out, grab my sleeve, say something real. She didn't. Back inside, the auctioneer was shuffling his notes, murmuring into his headset. The room buzzed with quiet energy. Rob sat in the front row, hunched and frowning, as if trying to shrink. I returned to my seat. My folder still lay neatly in my lap. When the auctioneer looked up, his eyes met mine. He gave a tiny nod. "Lot 7, he said, voice regaining its rhythm. "We are postponing the sale pending legal review of ownership rights. At this time, the property is no longer available for bidding." A few people grumbled. One man stood and left. Someone else muttered, "Knew that'd get messy." I sat very still. It was done. Not won, not celebrated, but stopped. And that was enough for today. The auction wrapped up half an hour later. No one looked at me as they left, but I could feel the stares brushing past, curious, cautious, occasionally pitying. I didn't mind. I wasn't there for them. Jeanette didn't return to the room. I saw Rob leave alone, walking quickly, shoulders tight, phone pressed to his ear. I imagined the conversation, something clipped, tense, full of sharp corners. I didn't envy him. I didn't hate him either. He was just a man who let himself believe the path of least resistance was always the smartest one. A lot of people do. When the room emptied, I remained in my seat. I needed a moment, not to rest exactly, but to sit with what had happened, to feel it, not just survive it. The auctioneer approached, folding his clipboard under one arm. "Mrs. Morgan," he said gently. "Miss," I corrected him. I never changed it. He smiled, nodded. "Miss Morgan, I reviewed the paperwork with our legal consultant. Everything's in order. The revocation stands. And with no valid POA in effect, your property cannot be sold without your explicit consent." "I know. I imagine this hasn't been an easy day." "No," I said. "But it was a necessary one." He hesitated. "I've seen a lot of families come through here. Most don't say a word, just sign, nod, move on. But what you did today," he shook his head slightly, "it mattered." I didn't reply. There wasn't anything to say. He left me with a quiet nod, and I sat a while longer, hands resting on the folder in my lap. I had won something, though it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing alone in the middle of a once crowded room, finally holding your ground, only to realize how much space silence can take up. When I stepped outside, the sun had shifted. Afternoon light, softer than before, filtered through the branches of the sycamore trees lining Ashbury Street. I walked slowly to the parking lot, and there she was, Jeanette. Leaning against her car, arms folded, sunglasses pushed up on her head like she'd forgotten they were there. She wasn't angry anymore, at least not outwardly. She looked tired. "Done?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I thought maybe you'd leave through the other door." "I don't use side exits anymore." That brought the faintest twitch to her lips. Not quite a smile, but close. "I didn't think you'd actually show up," she admitted after a pause. "That was the idea, wasn't it?" I said. "Count on me fading quietly." She didn't argue. I told myself I was helping, she said eventually, doing the responsible thing, planning ahead. You were planning for your convenience. Maybe, she admitted. But I also thought you wouldn't fight it, that maybe you'd even be relieved. I looked at her for a long moment. You stopped asking me what I wanted a long time ago. Her face tightened. You stopped telling me. I hadn't expected that, and for a second, I saw her not as the woman who'd tried to erase me from my own home, but as the child I once raised, still looking for an explanation, still waiting for something soft. Maybe we both forgot how to talk, I said quietly. Jeanette looked away. It's easier to make decisions when you pretend the other person won't argue. It's easier to pretend love looks like protection, even when it's control. She nodded slowly. So, now what? I go home, I said. And you decide what kind of daughter you want to be next. She flinched, but didn't walk away. I'm not asking for money, I added. Not for visits, not even for apologies. I just want you to stop managing me. Jeanette exhaled. You always made it so easy to step in. That's what mothers do, I said. Until one day they can't. Or won't. We stood in silence, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. Finally, she stepped aside. Let me know when you get home. I met her gaze. Why? So I know you're safe. It wasn't enough, but it was something. I nodded once, got into my car, and drove home. The gate squeaked like it always had. A small sound, metal against metal, barely noticeable to anyone else. But to me, it was a kind of welcome. My house had a language of its own, that soft moan of the porch steps, the tick of the hallway clock that was never quite in sync, the faint whistle of wind against the upstairs window when the weather turned. I knew them all. I'd memorized them without meaning to, like the lines on my own palms. I stepped through the front door and closed it gently behind me. Home. I hadn't realized how deeply I'd braced myself until I was back in that quiet space. Until I felt the weight between my shoulder blades begin to ease, like a breath I'd been holding for too long finally released itself. The living room looked just as I'd left it. Of course it did. No one else had been here. But something had changed. Not the furniture or the pictures or the soft throw on the couch. No, it was in me. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a waiting room for decline. It felt like a place I'd reclaimed. Not just legally, but emotionally. As mine. I kicked off my shoes and walked into the kitchen. The late afternoon sun spilled across the tile in thick amber streaks. I put on the kettle, then leaned on the counter, listening to the water begin its slow climb toward boiling. In the corner, a spider web stretched between two wooden slats on the pantry door. I smiled. Maybe tomorrow I'd clean it, or maybe I wouldn't. That choice was mine now. I poured my tea and took it to the dining room, where the stack of legal papers still sat. I hadn't touched them since the day I'd gone to the lawyer. I opened the folder now and laid the documents out like a small ceremony. The revocation of power of attorney, the notice of asset protection, the pending trust account still waiting on a final signature. And then, the paper that meant the most to me, a revised will. My old will had been written a decade ago. David had still been alive then. Everything was to go to Jeanette, with small mentions of Lily tucked at the bottom. Now things were different. I had left the house to Lily, not out of revenge, not to spite her mother, but because Lily still called, still sent postcards, still said, I love you without wanting anything in return. She saw me. That was enough. The rest of my savings I'd divided. Some for Lily, some for a women's fund at the local library, and a portion for myself, structured so that no one, no matter how close, could access it on my behalf again. It wasn't about money. It was about peace. I gathered the papers, returned them to the folder, and slid it into the bottom drawer of the secretary desk. Locked it. Then I picked up the phone. Lily answered on the second ring. "Nana," she said. "You okay?" "I am," I said, smiling. "I just got home." "Was it awful?" "It was necessary." She paused, then lowered her voice. "Mom's not talking, at all. She came home, slammed the door, went upstairs. Rob looked like he wanted to disappear." I didn't comment. "I don't know what happened," Lily said. "But whatever it was, I think it shook her." "It should," I said gently. "She didn't tell me anything. I just knew something was wrong. She tried to sell the house, Lily, without telling me, without asking." The silence on the other end of the line went dense. Oh my God. She thought I'd accept it, that I'd be quiet. "What did you do?" "I showed up." Another pause. "You are such a badass," Lily said. I laughed, loudly, freely. "That's not the word I'd use." "It's the one I'm using," she said. "Seriously, I'm proud of you." That made me quiet for a moment, not because I didn't believe her, but because I realized I hadn't heard those words in so long. Not from anyone. "Thank you," I said. "Can I come over this weekend?" "Please do." "I'll bring pie." "You always say that." And this time, I mean it. We said our goodbyes and I hung up. Outside, the sky was turning a dusky rose, and the maple tree out front swayed gently in the breeze. I stood at the window, watching the leaves shift and shimmer. It wasn't over. There would still be conversations, tension, unspoken things sitting heavy in the corners of rooms. But the house was mine again, and more importantly, so was I. It took her 3 days to call. Longer than I expected, honestly. I thought she might show up on my porch that same evening, furious or tearful, or both. But Jeanette didn't like messy scenes. She preferred control, order, private conversations where she could steer the narrative. And I think for once, she didn't know which story to tell. When my phone finally rang, I was in the garden, pulling up the last of the summer mint before it turned bitter. The screen flashed her name, and for a moment I just watched it buzz. No part of me rushed to answer. I finished what I was doing, wiped my hands on my apron, and only then picked it up. "Hello?" A pause. Then, "Hi, Mom." Her voice was different. Flat. Cautious. "I didn't think you'd answer." "You thought right." She sighed. "Look, I know things got complicated." "They didn't get complicated," I said. "You made a choice, and I responded to it." Another pause. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "Yes, you did." She bristled. I could hear it in the breath she didn't take. "You don't know what it's like," she said suddenly, "trying to juggle everything. Work, family, the constant pressure to keep everyone afloat. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to make things easier." For whom? Her silence was the only answer I needed. I sat on the back porch step, phone to my ear, the garden still fragrant with damp earth and mint. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's wind chime offered a soft, uncertain melody. "You stopped seeing me as a person," I said. "I became a project, a liability, something to handle." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" I asked quietly. More silence. "I know I didn't ask for help often," I said. I let you think I was fine when I wasn't. I swallowed a lot to keep the peace. But there's a difference between independence and invisibility. I never thought you were invisible. No, I said. You just acted like I had no voice left. She exhaled, long and weary. I thought I was doing what Dad would have wanted. That caught me off guard. For a heartbeat, I forgot I was angry. What your father would have wanted, I repeated slowly, was for his daughter to treat her mother like someone with a mind and a heart, not like a puzzle to be solved. He hated seeing you struggle, and I hated watching him die, I snapped. But I stayed. I didn't rearrange his life while he was sleeping. I hadn't planned to say that. But once it came out, I didn't regret it. Jeanette didn't reply. I could hear her breathing. Just that. I didn't do this to shame you, I said. I did it because I refused to be erased. I know. I waited. I'm sorry, she added finally. And it wasn't much, but it didn't sound rehearsed. Good, I said. Now act like it. She let out a soft laugh, surprised maybe, a little wounded. I'm not giving the house back to you, if that's what you're calling about. I know. I changed the will. She was quiet. Lily gets it, I said. And I'm moving my savings to a protected account. No one gets to touch it unless I say so. I get it. I don't think you do, I said, more gently this time. But maybe you will. She cleared her throat. Lily told me you're having her over this weekend. Yes. She's closer to you than she is to me sometimes. That's not an accident. I didn't say it to hurt her. I said it because it was true. You can come too, if you like, I added after a moment. If you're ready to listen, not manage. Jeanette didn't answer right away. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's all I ask. We ended the call not as friends, not as mother and daughter the way we used to be, but as two women who understood that something had been broken and that it might never return to its original shape. But maybe, just maybe, something else could be built in its place. I stood, brushed dirt from my knees, and went back to the garden. Lily arrived just after noon on Saturday, arms full of bags and face glowing like she'd just stepped out of spring. It had been raining all morning, that quiet kind of fall rain that taps softly on the roof and smells of old leaves and damp earth. But when I opened the door, she brought the sun with her. Don't panic, she said, stepping inside. I brought the pie, and not store-bought this time. I swear. I'll believe it when I taste it, I said, smiling. She laughed, kicked off her boots, and pulled me into a hug that was warm and real and lingered just a moment longer than usual. I felt it then, what I hadn't let myself feel at the auction, or in the car, or even that night when I'd returned home. Relief. It didn't look like tears. It didn't sound like a sigh. It was quieter than all that. It was simply knowing that someone had shown up, not to take something, not to fix me, not to explain, but just to be there. She helped me in the kitchen, setting the table, putting out plates, warming the pie in the oven like she'd done it 100 times. When we sat down to eat, she looked at me and said, "Mom told me some of what happened." I nodded. Some is probably the right word. She didn't defend it, Lily said quickly. She looked tired. I think she's scared, Nana. Of you. Of what it means now that you said no. I sipped my tea. I've said no before. Not like this. I didn't argue. She's not evil, Lily added. She's just so used to being in charge, and when people like that lose control, they panic. She had no right. I know. That was enough. I didn't need Lily to take sides. I didn't want her to. I changed the will, I said gently. I hope that doesn't put you in a difficult position. She shook her head. It's not about the will. I studied her for a moment. You're a lot braver than I was at your age. She grinned. You don't know what I'm afraid of. But you show up anyway, I said. That's the part that counts. The pie, by the way, was wonderful. Flaky crust, tart, sweet apples, just enough cinnamon. We talked for hours. About books, about her job, about the guy she was seeing, whom she described as mostly tolerable, except when he tries to make quinoa from scratch. I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in weeks. As we cleared the table, I saw her glance out the window. Is someone coming? I asked. She hesitated. Mom texted me this morning. Said she might stop by. I felt the stillness settle back into the room. Not tension exactly, just the awareness of possibility. I didn't invite her, Lily added quickly, but I didn't tell her not to come either. I nodded, and then, like a clock responding to cue, the doorbell rang. We stood in the kitchen, silent. I looked at Lily. She looked at me. You don't have to open it, she said. But I already was walking. Jeanette stood on the porch in a long coat, her hair pulled back, a white envelope in one hand. I won't stay, she said immediately. I had to hand this to you in person. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. She held the envelope out. It's the final signature for the trust transfer. I had my lawyer sign off. I took it without a word. And I canceled the secondary access, she added. I had no business on your accounts. No, I said. You didn't. She nodded, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said, but I want you to know I'm trying. Trying, not fixing, not pleading, just that. I stepped back from the door. You can come in, I said quietly, but only as a guest. Jeanette hesitated, then stepped inside. She didn't ask where to sit. She didn't reach for anything. She moved slowly, like someone entering sacred ground they hadn't earned the right to walk. Lily joined us in the living room, handed her a cup of tea without a word. And for the first time in years, the three of us sat in the same room. Not as family in a photo frame, not as roles we'd been assigned, but as women, each carrying her own damage, her own choices, her own grief. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was something quieter, more fragile, a beginning. Lily arrived just after noon on Saturday, her arms full of bags and her smile too wide for someone who'd just driven 2 hours in the rain. I opened the door to the smell of wet pavement and cinnamon. Don't panic, she said, stepping in. I brought pie, and yes, I actually made it this time. Then we'll both be surprised by how it tastes. She grinned, kicked off her boots, and hugged me, tight and warm and lingering just a second longer than usual. I felt it in that hug. The weight of the week, the undercurrent of worry, the small relief of presence. We moved through the kitchen like we always had. She set the pie on the counter. I poured the tea. Neither of us mentioned the auction, or Jeanette, or the quiet echo of what had nearly been taken. Not right away. But when we sat down, napkins unfolded and plates full, she looked at me and said, She told me a little. I didn't ask who she meant. I just nodded. She didn't defend it, Lily added. She just said you'd made your position very clear. I did. She looked shaken. She should be. Lily hesitated. I think she believed it wouldn't matter. That you'd let it go. She's believed that for a long time. We ate in silence for a while. The pie was surprisingly good. Flaky, not too sweet, just the way I liked it. When Lily caught me nodding at the crust, she grinned. "See?" she said. "I'm evolving." "I'm proud of you," I said, and I meant it more than she probably realized. She leaned back, tea in hand. "You changed your will." "I did. You don't have to explain." "I want to," I said. "It's not because I love you more. It's because you show up, because you see me, and because I want this house to stay with someone who understands what it means." Lily's throat moved as she swallowed hard. She didn't cry, but her eyes went soft. "I'll take care of it," she said, "when it's time." "I know." We cleared the table together, the way we always had. She dried the dishes while I wiped the counters. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, soft as breath. And then the doorbell rang. She froze. I didn't invite her, Lily said quickly. She just said she might stop by. I nodded once, then walked to the door and opened it. Jeanette stood on the porch, coat damp at the shoulders, envelope in hand. "I won't stay," she said. "I just came to give you this." I took it, unsealed. Inside, a single page, her signature, finalizing the trust. "I also removed myself from all account access," she added. "You won't need to chase that down." "Good," I said. She hesitated, then added, "I'm not asking for a seat at the table, but I'm trying." I studied her face, the tightness, the flicker of shame behind the eyes. "You can come in," I said, "but only as a guest." She nodded, and for the first time in years, she crossed my threshold, not as someone with expectations, but as someone who finally understood the weight of the door she'd once tried to close behind me. She didn't stay long. Jeanette sat on the edge of the living room armchair, legs crossed, hands folded too carefully in her lap, like she didn't know what to do with herself in this house anymore. She accepted a cup of tea from Lily with a quiet thank you, and barely sipped it. I watched her eyes move across the room, the fireplace mantel, the framed photographs, the quilt over the back of the couch. Her gaze lingered on a photo of David holding Lily as a toddler, both of them mid-laugh. "This place hasn't changed," she said, almost to herself. "It didn't need to," I answered. She looked at me then, not sharply, not defensively, just looked. "I used to think that meant you were stuck," she said, "that you were afraid to move forward. And now? I think maybe I didn't want to see what you were holding together here. Because if I saw it, I'd have to admit I was letting go of something too quickly." Lily shifted in her seat, but said nothing. She knew better than to interrupt. Jeanette set her tea down. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom." "I'm not offering it," I replied. "Not today." She nodded. "Fair." But she didn't get up to leave. She stayed, awkward in her stillness, as if waiting for something neither of us knew how to name. I thought of all the times I had held my tongue for her sake, the years I had made myself smaller to avoid her disappointment, her opinions, her thinly veiled corrections. I remembered the birthdays where she showed up late, the holidays where her smile was tight with obligation. I remembered, too, the way she used to cling to my arm as a child in crowded stores, the way she once wept when I left her at college. We were not just mother and daughter. We were a long series of choices. Some tender, some careless. "I don't want the house," she said suddenly. "I never did, really. I think I wanted control. Because you always felt out of reach. Because I stopped letting you run my life? Because I never understood how you could live so quietly, so completely, without needing more. I sat back. Quiet isn't the same as small or weak. You mistake stillness for absence. She looked at her hands. I was afraid of becoming you, she admitted. Afraid of staying in one place and watching everything else move on without me. You were afraid of staying, I said, and I was afraid of leaving. We built opposite lives. And now? Now I'm not afraid. She blinked at that. Looked down again. I don't know what to do with the space between us. You don't have to do anything with it, I said. You just have to stop pretending it's not there. That silence again. Not angry. Not even sad. Just full of things we hadn't said and maybe never would. She stood, finally. I'm going to go, she said. But I'd like to come back. Not to manage, just to visit. If that's allowed. I nodded. It is. On my terms. She didn't argue. Lily walked her to the door. I didn't follow. I listened to the soft exchange between them. No raised voices, no tension. Just the sound of goodbye. When Lily returned, she carried the teacup Jeanette had barely touched. She rinsed it without a word. Do you think she'll mean it? She asked finally. About coming back. I think she's trying. That doesn't fix it. No, I said, but it's a beginning. We sat together for a while after that. No noise but the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath our chairs and the rustle of wind through the trees outside. You okay, Nana? Lily asked. I took a moment before answering. Yes, I said. For the first time in a long time, I think I am. The next few weeks passed in a quiet rhythm. Jeanette didn't visit again right away, but she called once. Just once. It was a short conversation, stilted, with long pauses, as if we were speaking through a fog neither of us could quite clear. But it was polite, cautious, civil. That was a beginning, too. Meanwhile, I returned to my own life, the one I'd nearly let slip away under the weight of someone else's certainty. I started going back to the library again on Thursday mornings. The women there always saved me the chair by the window, the one closest to the heating vent in winter. I spent long afternoons tending the yard. The roses needed pruning, and the ivy by the fence had begun creeping too far again. There was a comfort in putting my hands in the dirt, in coaxing beauty from something wild. It reminded me that I still had time, still had power, still had the right to tend what was mine. I even started baking again. I'd stopped for a while after David died. Just one of those little things that felt too quiet without someone to share it with. But now I made bread on Sundays, the kind he used to love. I wrapped the extra in parchment and gave it to neighbors. Not because I needed the company, but because I liked the exchange. Something warm passing from hand to hand. No expectations. No noise. Lily came by most weekends. She didn't always stay long. She had a life, a job, her own apartment filled with plants and chaos. But she always came. She brought stories, laughter, sometimes her laundry. I didn't mind. One Saturday, she brought a book with her. You should read this, she said, placing it gently on the coffee table. The main character reminded me of you. I looked at the cover. A woman on a porch, gazing out at an open field. She doesn't do much, Lily added, but somehow everything changes around her. I smiled. Sounds familiar. We didn't talk about Jeanette much. Sometimes Lily would mention something, an email, a conversation, a moment of frustration, but she never tried to explain her mother's choices. I appreciated that. It wasn't her burden to carry. Still, I knew she was watching both of us, quietly hoping. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch sipping tea, she asked, Do you miss her? I didn't answer right away. I miss what I thought we might have, I said. But no, I don't miss being managed. Do you think she'll ever change? She already has. Just not in all the ways I wanted. And that's okay. Lily nodded, thoughtful. I think she's scared of becoming you. She told me that. But I think she's even more scared of ending up alone. She's not alone, I said. Not if she learns how to be honest. I didn't say it out of malice. I wasn't trying to sound wise or distant. It was just the truth. That evening, after Lily left, I sat at the piano. It had been years since I'd played. My fingers moved slowly, uncertain at first, as if the keys were testing me back. But then something settled. Muscle memory, maybe. Or just a small, unexpected joy. The melody was simple. Old. Something David used to hum without realizing. I played until the light outside turned amber, then blue, then disappeared altogether. The room was quiet again. Not empty, never empty. But filled with a kind of peace I hadn't known I was still allowed to feel. And for the first time in months, I didn't think about what might be taken next. I thought about what I still had. The letter came in the middle of November. A simple envelope. No return address. Jeanette's handwriting. Neat. Familiar. Too formal. I sat at the kitchen table before opening it, the way I always had with her letters when she was younger. Back then, they'd come from summer camp, from college, from early work trips. Little updates. Scraps of her life sent home to be held. This one felt heavier. Inside, 2 pages. Handwritten, not typed. The first line read, I didn't know how to say this aloud. I read it slowly. No part of me rushed. She didn't make excuses? That surprised me. She wrote about fear. About watching me age and not knowing what to do with it. About control as a reflex, a substitute for closeness. About how she'd convinced herself that taking charge was the same as showing care. I think I forgot that you had a life before I was born, she wrote. That you knew things long before I ever stood on my own feet. Somewhere along the way, I stopped looking at you. I started managing you like a task. She wrote about the house, not just the sale, but the memories. The walls where she'd hidden crayon drawings. The staircase where she once sat, crying after her first breakup. The kitchen where I'd taught her how to crack an egg without getting shell in the bowl. I thought selling it would protect us from the mess of aging. I see now. It would have erased everything. There was no dramatic apology. Just a quiet kind of reckoning. Near the end, she wrote, I understand if you don't want me back in your life the way things were. I only ask that. If there's space, maybe we can build something new. Not mother and daughter the way we used to be. Just 2 women trying not to disappear. I folded the letter carefully, smoothed the creases, set it on the table and stared at it while the kettle warmed. She hadn't asked for forgiveness, and I respected her for that. What she offered wasn't a fix. It was a door, cracked open, an invitation without pressure. That evening, I walked the yard, bundled in my coat, hands in my pockets. The leaves were nearly gone now. Bare branches reached into a sky the color of ash. The cold made everything quiet in a different way. Not like summer's peace, but like winter's pause. A stillness before change. I thought about how long I'd carried the silence between us. How much weight that silence had gathered over the years. Every missed birthday call. Every unspoken hurt. Every sigh I'd swallowed. And how one letter, 2 pages, had begun to loosen its hold. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if we'd ever be what people called close. But I knew one thing. She saw me now. Not just as a mother. Not as a woman in a house she no longer understood. But as a person. With boundaries. With breath. That was something. The next morning, I wrote her back. Just one page. I told her I got the letter. That I believed her. That I was willing to try. Not to forget. Not to return. But to begin again from where we were. Honest. Equal. Grown. And then I added, if you ever want to come back to the house, the door is open. But you walk through it as my guest, and you leave your clipboard at home. I signed it with just my name, no mom, no title. Then I slipped it into the envelope and mailed it. The air was cold on my cheeks when I stepped outside. But it didn't feel harsh. It felt clean. She came again in December. No warning, no fanfare. Just the sound of her car pulling into the drive, the low crunch of tires over cold gravel. I watched from the window as she stepped out, scarf wrapped tight, hands bare despite the wind. She had no bag, no clipboard, just a tin in her hands, silver, with a red ribbon. I opened the door before she could knock. I brought ginger snaps, she said, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Of course you did, I said, and stepped aside. She entered quietly, removed her coat, took off her shoes. Every gesture careful, deliberate. She didn't ask where to sit this time. She waited. Tea? I asked. She nodded. Please. We moved through the motions, boil, pour, steep, in companionable silence. The kind that used to belong to us before things got heavy. Before control replaced conversation. In the living room, she set the tin on the table, but didn't open it. I read your letter 3 times, she said finally. I didn't know one page could hold so much. You used to say the same thing about recipes. She smiled. A small one, but real. I didn't expect you to answer. You didn't expect a lot of things. She winced. Nodded. No, I didn't. We sipped our tea. The house was warm, the light outside a soft gray. The kind of afternoon that pressed everything a little closer together. No noise but the hum of the radiator and the faint sound of wind through bare trees. After a while, she leaned forward and opened the tin. They're from your recipe, she said. I had to dig through old notebooks to find it. I took one, broke it in half. The scent, ginger, molasses, clove, rose up like memory. You didn't burn them. I made 3 batches. We sat together and ate in silence. No lectures, no explanations, just the snap of cookies, the comfort of shared time, and the slow repair of something long broken. She stayed an hour. Didn't try to fill it. Didn't try to fix anything. When she left, she didn't say, "See you soon?" She said, "Thank you for letting me in." And I said, "Thank you for coming as yourself." I stood at the window as she drove away, the silver tin tucked under her arm, now half empty. The house felt quiet again, but not hollow. Just full of its own breath. After she left, I sat at the piano, played a few chords, just enough. And then I wrote, not to Jeanette, not to Lily, to myself. A page, maybe 2, about what it means to stay, to own your space, to speak when silence is easier, to begin again even after the years have settled heavy in your chest. I placed the pages in the blue notebook. Then I poured another cup of tea. I didn't win anything in the traditional sense. There was no justice served, no confession broadcast to a courtroom, no grand gesture of reconciliation. But I kept my house. I kept my name. I kept my voice. And that, in the quiet accounting of a long life, is more than enough. If this story moved something in you, share it. Tell someone. or simply sit with it for a while. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay exactly where you are and not apologize for it. If this resonated with you, leave a comment or send it to someone who needs it. There's power in being seen.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.